All right, so with that, I am going to hand it off to my two colleagues, Harmon and Mark.
Awesome.
Thanks, Tamara.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things, Mark, that I just wanted to start with, because I know there were a lot of questions in our breakout session and also in the larger session, is just shared language around pronunciation about the Sikh faith, because that's an important question. I know there's a lot of confusion around it for a variety of reasons that we'll get into. The correct pronunciation, as preferred by the Sikh community, is Sikh, S-I-K-H, almost pronounced like the word sick, but with a hard H at the end, so Sikh. There are some people who say Sikh, but that is actually like the British pronunciation. We'll talk about what some of that means as we get into the session. But important thing I just wanted to clarify right off the bat: Sikh is the correct pronunciation for the community. Now, obviously, hopefully, folks had a chance to read through some of these quick facts. One of the things that folks often wonder about is, well, if Sikhism is the fifth largest major world religion, there's over 500,000 Sikhs here in the United States. Why is it that we never learn about Sikhism, or it's never portrayed in popular media and culture and education, et cetera? And one of the things I think is important to clarify as to why that might be is that the vast majority of Sikhs still live in this one state in the country of India called Punjab. So although there are 500,000 Sikhs here in the United States, the vast majority of Sikhs live in this one state called Punjab in India. And so because there's such a concentration of Sikhs in this one state, in this one country, it's oftentimes a religion that is excluded when folks are talking about major world religions. Now, those demographics are shifting rapidly. More and more Sikhs are leaving the state of Punjab and, traveling to the West and all over the world. And so those numbers will change as we'll understanding about the Sikh community. But it's an important thing to consider, because I know that's oftentimes like one of those confusion points of like, well, why is it that folks don't know who Sikhs are if there are so many Sikhs in the world? And keep in mind, within the country of India, Sikhs make up only 2% of the population there. So it's an extreme minority in India. It's an extreme minority in just about every country. And because there is such a vast diaspora all over the world, there is no country that has a majority Sikh population. And so part of that is the reason folks don't know a lot about the Sikh community. So Mark, I'll pass it over to you. I know we had some questions, some exercises that we wanted folks to kind of discuss here.
For sure. Thank you, Harmon. Before you end, though, I want to talk about what you just put in chat too. Sikh to person. Tell me more about that.
What I was trying to type out, and I had butterfingers and accidentally hit enter before I could fully type it out. I was just trying to clarify, Sikh is like what you would call a person. So I am a Sikh. Sikhi is the religion itself. And so I was trying to make that clarification in terms of like folks not necessarily having the shared language around it. I'll type it up in a moment and put it fully in the chat in a way that makes sense. My apologies for the confusion there.
Oh, no problem whatsoever. That's one of Zoom's least favorite features is you can't fix your chat. And that makes me kind of crazy. One of the things I wanted to do is just making sure that we all see this, hear this, is I wonder if I could get two different volunteers, one volunteer to just talk through those top two boxes. You can read it, you can just talk generally about what it says. I want to make sure that this is kind of out into the ether here, and we're all hearing this, in part because some of it is pretty small font, honestly. So do we have a volunteer to read those top two boxes? What's in the top two boxes?
I can read them. I might not do the best on the second box with pronunciation, but I will try.
That's all right. Thank you, Leslie.
So the first box talks about Sikhism as the fifth largest, also known as Sikhi, religion in the world. And their core values are love, service, and justice. And then the second box, there are more than 25 million Sikhs worldwide. Guru Nanak was born in Punjab, a region in South Asia that spans modern-day Pakistan and Northwest India. Most of the world's Sikhs today continue to live in Punjab. And the founder of Sikhi is Guru Nanak, born in 1469 AD.
Thank you so much. Somebody want to read the next two for us, or the last two?
Credible estimates on this Sikh American population range from about 300,000 to 700,000. The number most commonly cited is 500,000. The Sikh identity includes 5 articles of faith. The most visible aspects of the Sikh identity include the unshorn hair and the turban. Many wrongly describe Sikhism as a blend of Islam and Hinduism. Sikhi is an independent religion with its own prophets, scriptures, practices, ceremonies, and beliefs.
Thank you, Janice. Appreciate you jumping in there too. So one of the things we want to do is spend a little bit of time in whole group after we looked at these and just read through these critical important facts. What maybe stuck out to you? So anybody can jump in here. If you feel more comfortable, you can use the raise hand function, which is in the reactions, but you can also just turn on your microphone and start talking. So again, the question is, as you read these facts, critically important facts, what stands out to you?
I'm gonna speak on that. I believe there's a lot of ignorance when it comes to, you know, the turban and how they correlate them with, you know, Islam. People need to just speak to each other and be respectful. And just, you know, that's it. I hate when people use racism and other lines of hatred in this conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Good to see you again. Other ideas?
I guess to me, I was surprised to hear that even though we have millions of people that are part of this faith group, and within India, it's only such a small percentage of the population. I guess India is a big country in terms of population in general, but I guess that was quite a surprise that within India it was such a small group. Even though, of course, we know now that worldwide is the 5th largest faith in existence.
Thanks, Alfonso.
I'm intrigued by the simple but eloquent core values. 3, and they're beautiful. I don't know how many of us who attend the Catholic or Lutheran or can say this is what our religion, these are our core values. Simple, eloquent, beautiful.
Thanks, Margot.
Excuse me, one of the things that stood out to me in looking at that visual was how recent the start of the religion was, and I think it was 1459. So yeah, and just it got me pondering why then, I guess. So
thanks, Liz.
One of the things that stood out to me was it was in one of the smaller boxes, but it talked about the most visible aspects of the religion, which kind of ties into, you know, some of the ways in which the Sikh people are, you know, attacked, you know, because of these visual things that are a part of their religion. And so that kind of stood out to me because not many of us wear such visible symbolisms. Maybe as Christians, you might wear a cross or something like that, but there are, you know, select religions that have such, you know, some visual aspects of their religion.
Thanks, Bianca. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's so many great observations there that I'm just delighted because I know we're going to touch on a lot of them. One of them I just want to touch on, because I know this is one of the things where folks come in with a lot of questions, and I think it's good to just kind of address it early, and then we can dig into it deeper as we go on, is like particularly the turban, right? Because that's oftentimes the elephant in the room. Any room I walk into, that's usually the first thing people notice, and I'm usually the only person wearing a turban in the room, unless I go to a Gurdwara, which is like a Sikh house of worship. And so, there's a lot of cultures where folks do wear turbans, right, across the world. Different styles, different shapes, different fabric, all of that taken into account. But from all of the research I've done, from everything I've read, Sikhism is the only religion that mandates people who practice the religion wear a turban, right? So some folks wear it for cultural reasons, local geographic reasons, but Sikhism is the only religion that mandates folks who practice the religion also wear a turban. And for the folks who do wear turbans, it's a representation of everything that you believe in, right? It's a part of my body in a way that, like, if someone were to say, oh, you have to take off your turban, it would be like asking me to take off my arm, right? That's how deeply it's entrenched into the Sikh psyche, in the sense that it's not just cloth that I tie around my head every day. It's a representation of my family, my ancestry, my culture, my religion, my language. Everything about me is also tied in the turban. And so that's one of the things that we'll touch on, is like what it means and why folks who are Sikh wear the turban. But I just wanted to kind of bring that to the forefront as one of the things that we'll definitely be touching on.
Thanks, Harmon. I appreciate that. And, in that box, it's also talking about articles of faith. And so we'll be spending some more time talking about those articles of faith as we go through these few weeks here too. So the second question is, what's confirming, challenging, or changing your thinking? So after you've seen these fast but critically important facts, what maybe is changing your thinking, or confirming what you already knew, or challenging you in some way?
I think that I always thought that it was some sort of, that Sikhism was some sort of blend of Islam and Hinduism. So when I did the readings, the reading for tonight, I was surprised. So this just confirms what I read.
Thank you, Laura.
I guess for me, what's confirming is I think it was 2 summers ago, the first Sikh female graduated from West Point. And I didn't do a lot, but I did dig in a little bit I didn't know anything. I'm like, why is this a big deal? I want to know more about it. And so doing the video and then looking at this, they did talk about it being a very peaceful, loving religion. And so then seeing it again, the love, service, and justice, just reaffirmed the little bit I had already known.
Thank you, Leslie. So those of you that are, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, okay. One of the things that's really challenging me, especially, is all of the stereotypes that I'll say, speak for myself, that I've been inundated with about this religion, and especially some of the the turban, the articles of clothing, like these misrepresentation of people that we often see, that I feel like we spend a lot of time, or people spend lots of time making sure that all of these stereotypes are out there for us to intake, yet don't see that it's necessary that 25 million people be accurately represented in our educational system. So it's just kind of, I just kind of think about, where are these touch points for me that these stereotypes have come up and have been, impressed upon me, just from living in our society and culture, and how little of it is accurate.
Thank you, Bianca. I appreciate that. And that actually kind of leads me into a point. So one of the things when we did the the small group and talked about my why. One of my whys is that when I was teaching, and it's been a while ago, folks, but when I was teaching, we would do units on religion, and Sikhi was one of the units or one of the religions that we were studying. But I think we did it at a level where it's kind of like, well, here are the facts, and here's this, and here's that, and it didn't really take. And so part of my why for being here is to really kind of dig in. So the facts that we have here are really important, but they're not sufficient, I would say. Knowing that Sikhi is the 5th largest religion in the world is important for sure, but it doesn't really get us to the humans and the humanity of this religion. And so part of our charge through these next few weeks is to really get there, and we're already starting to see that. So Harmon is kind of putting some context in with us to help us kind of understand that. And that's exciting to me. And I think we're going to continue to learn and grow with each other as we go forward. So I would like to jump to the next. Yeah, thank you, Tamara. So as we're doing this, and this kind of fits in with our Embracing Equity for Agreements that Kevin talked about earlier, but I want to just kind of do a little bit of a reminder. As we're talking with each other, as we're leaning in, and speak from the heart. So certainly we can filter ourselves pretty easily, and often do, to kind of say things in the right way or what have you. And that may or may not be speaking from the heart. So we want to get to actually not just the knowledge part, but also the heart. What are we feeling? And so Tamara kind of foregrounded some of that in the wordle that she showed us earlier. Speak also from the I. So try not to essentially put somebody else's ideas together yourself. So talk about what you feel, not necessarily what others do or don't feel. Listen with the intention to hear. So I know I'm as guilty as anyone of I hear people, but I'm not necessarily hearing people. Like I'm kind of already processing, what am I going to say next or what have you. And so that's always a challenge for me. When we're in these spaces, both in small group and in large group, we want to obviously share the space, and people are already doing a beautiful job of this evening. You can clearly see people are helping one another and building off one another and what have you. So I want to talk about this idea of double confidentiality. So some of you who have been to our sessions before have maybe heard this, and it was probably Rudy, who isn't here tonight, but Rudy was one of the people who talks about this. It's part of restorative justice. So one of the ideas with restorative justice is that we're creating a container. So all of us are kind of in this container together. And essentially what's shared in the container stays in the container. So for example, if you share something in your small group and somebody else does, that doesn't mean that that's for public consumption. That's not necessarily something that goes back to everybody. Certainly if the person wants to share their own truth or whatever they said, excellent. We have no issue with that, but be careful about sharing what somebody else may or may not have discussed. And then even outside this container. So let's say I meet with Margot, because Margot and I know each other and work together a lot actually, meet with Margot about something. We have to be careful about how we talk about some of these things, because we want to honor the container. We want people to feel brave, and you can't necessarily feel safe in these spaces, because we've made the argument that there is no such thing as a safe space, but there is a brave space, and that's what we're trying to build here together. But just being careful about how we talk to one another. So this double confidentiality issue, one of the things that I think helps illustrate it is in a counselor, a mental health counselor, for example, the counselor would never agrees never to speak what is shared outside of the session, and also even potentially acknowledging somebody else. So this is not a counselee situation, but it's just I'm using that as an illustration to kind of say, be careful how we work together here. So double confidentiality. And the last one is trust one another to feel. The the way I'm going to put this is kind of allow people to feel their feels. You'll hear Tamara say something like that. She's in her feelings or whatever. And Kevin's right. She may have a tissue out later. We know Tamara, but that's okay. But we want to allow people to do that so that they can process and learn. And I think, and I'm again somebody who does this, a typical approach is trying to kind of help try and soothe that person or help them so they feel better. And that's great. And sometimes it's really necessary, but in other times it's actually potentially interrupting that person's process at the expense of our comfort. So it actually bothers us. And so we're trying to make this kind of go away. And in some cases, we need people to be able to have their feelings, and we need to trust that they can do that. And, you know, we'll support any way we can, but we have to be careful about how we do that. So, so we're going to keep moving here. Tamara, are we jumping into small group now, or are we doing that after this gets introduced?
Yep, we're gonna watch the video. We're gonna kick it to Harmon. Who's gonna set up the video here, and then we'll discuss in small groups.
So Harmon, can you just kind of share a bit about this video and how we ended up using this video?
Yeah, you know, so there's certainly a lot of videos out there that can talk about Sikhi from a lot of different perspectives. You know, this video does a quick overview of the faith. And again, I think it's important just for shared language, shared understanding of the history, some basic facts to kind of go over that. There's a clip in there I think we're going to rewatch real quick that's like 13 seconds, but I think it's an important one that just kind of, again, sets the stage for the rest of the conversation.
Okay, so with that, it's a short clip, so let's all be paying attention, right? And I'm going to go ahead and share it, and hopefully I have my volume set so you will be able to hear it. If not, somebody unmute and bring my attention to it. So here we go.
This leads us to an important reminder. Whenever you study any religion, religions are internally diverse. They're not monolithic. A lot of what we said up until now are generalizations about Sikh belief and practice, but just like members of any other religion, Sikhs differ widely on their interpretation of their beliefs and observe their practices differently.
For example, not all Sikhs maintain the 5 Ks. There are many Sikhs who cut their hair or shave or don't wear turbans at all, and this doesn't make them any less Sikh. The term Sahajdari is often used to describe those who self-identify as Sikh, but don't maintain the visible Sikh identity.
Moreover, within the Khalsa itself, there's a variety of groups who differ on aspects of what it means to be Sikh. Some who interpret the 5 Ks differently, others, such as the Nanak Star movement, claim that Guru Nanak appeared to their leader in the early 20th century. We don't have time to go through each group individually, but it's important to remember the internal diversity of Sikhi, so we don't form a one-dimensional.
Awesome.
So folks, in the chat right now, I'm putting the 3 questions that are up on the screen here so that we have those when we jump into the small groups. And I just pasting in the 3rd one right now. So we want to spend some time going into small groups, kind of processing. Hopefully you had seen the entire video, but I think in some cases we can make some connections just based on these questions and thinking about that and thinking about what you've heard so far. So Tamara, I think whenever you're ready, we can jump.
All right, and I just want to do a time check here because we're already almost at 7 o'clock and we want to show the other video as well. So Harmon, if they don't have enough time to talk about all 3 questions, is there one in particular or wherever they want to enter the conversation?
Yeah, I think wherever people want to enter, and then we can just come back real quick and kind of talk through it.
Okay, sounds good. So let's go ahead and do about 5 minutes. Does this 5 minutes seem okay? Okay, and then we'll come back and we'll watch a new clip. So, and again, this video was sent out as homework, so you'll be able to watch the whole video if you haven't already done so. So I'm going to move us back into the same breakout groups so you get a chance to go a little bit deeper with each other, and we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Tamara, you.
All right, welcome back.
All right, yeah, welcome back everybody. That was a short one, but still powerful. It's good to hear from one another. Any particular comments that people want to make to the whole group about any of these three questions or what you talked about in your small group?
We didn't, of course, have enough time, and this is like kind of burning on my lips, so I just want to share that. One of my frustrations is, we're here to learn and be allies, and to hear that the ism is the Sikh people trying to accommodate us in America. Like, that's very frustrating to me. I see it with students who have, names from their country of origin, and then they'll pick an American name because we don't know how to pronounce it. So it's really frustrating to me, because frustrating and then happy that there's people on this call to know, if you're talking to somebody, you don't say the ism, because that's not in their language. And, it's just a sign of respect. So it's just frustrating to me that people are trying to always adapt so we can understand them, and we should be adapting and not other people. So
Appreciate that, Leslie. Other ideas?
Mark, I just want to say I agree with the last comment 100%.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I especially want to say, with Leslie's comment, and decide as educators in classrooms, and thinking that students need to accommodate for us is just so disheartening to me. We're the professionals in the room. We're supposed to be doing this professional learning and making sure we stay on top of it, like many of us are doing here today, to make sure that we can adapt for the sake of our students learning, and that we can be flexible and things of that nature. But all too often, what I see is people trying to make, kids adapt to what they're presenting instead of the other way around, which is totally negates what we're supposed to be doing as educators. So I think we can't lose sight of that as we continue our professional learning.
I think that's right, Bianca. And we've all heard those stories of a new kid comes into the class and the teacher decides that they're going to only just use their nickname or whatever it is that makes them feel comfortable. And then that carries on with all of the kids. So everybody then starts calling that young person whatever name they were quote unquote given. And so it is really problematic. And that's part of why we do this work together. If we're serious about this idea of leaning into our shared history for our collective liberation and healing, that's part of this work. It's our shared history. We have to work together. We, as Tamara said earlier, our liberation can't be disconnected from somebody else. If some of us aren't free, then none of us are free, kind of idea. So I want to keep going, just making note of the time. I want to go to the next slide, please, Tamara. And Harmon, I'm going to ask you to set up this video too, if you would, please.
Sure, absolutely. So this next video, it's pretty quick, but it's just about a glimpse into the Sikh community in the contemporary world, because again, a lot of the focus in the education space is understanding the historical perspective, but that doesn't necessarily give you insight into who the Sikh community is today. So this is just a quick look into that. Then we have some discussion questions that follow.
We're serving protester pasta in Queens, New York today. When we saw the protester fighting against racism, we feel they are doing very great thing. That's the only one reason we helping them with the food, because we know they are doing great cause. After 9/11 in United States, a lot of discrimination against Sikhism because people think we are the part of those who attack. We're serving protester pasta in Queens, New York today. After 9/11 in United States, a lot of discrimination against Sikhism because people think we are the part of those who attack on us, which is very wrong. There's a lot of hate crime against the Sikh. There's a Sikh temple in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and one gunman enter in the Gurdwara and shoot those innocent people. We just want to tell each and everybody in the United States, we are peaceful people and we are part of the world.
Today we make pasta. So last time we make Indian food. So different time, different food.
When you go and put your tables and bring the grocery out of the van, bring the hot food out of the van and put on the table, the people in line, we see the smiling on their face, and we feel at that time we're doing the good thing and people blessing us.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you. Black Lives Matter.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We don't believe in racism. We are Sikh. We are stand against this type of things.
All right. So as Harman mentioned, there are a couple of questions that we want to spend some time talking through here, but I'm going to do what Tamara lovingly refers to as a clunky facilitation move, which is, Tamara, we want small group, large group, what do we want to do here?
I think the small groups allow a little bit more voice, and we're at 7:10, so I think we could do that and then come back and debrief in whole group.
That sounds good. So if we could just see the screen quick, I want to just talk through those questions. And while you're getting moved into your breakout groups, you can start thinking about, what your thoughts might be based on what we just saw. So the Sikh gentleman spoke on the need for clarifying that Sikhs are not terrorists in the post 9/11 world. How might the paradigm of good immigrants versus bad immigrants have shaped the Sikh perspective? And the second one is, how does the Sikh worldview of Ik Onkar play into the support Sikhs provided to the Black Lives Matter movement? Harman, did I say that right? I bet I didn't, but can you say?
Oh gosh, yep, that is correct.
Wow, okay, I got lucky then. So we're going to be jumping into small groups here, and I have pasted these questions into chat already, so you should have them there.
Herman, is there any other context we should have before we move into small groups?
Just provided a little bit in the chat, but yeah, I think that's good. We'll hop right back in.
Okay, thank you for putting that in the chat. So, okay, I'm going to move us into small groups. And again, we have about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and talk in whole group.
And I never would have thought of, but it makes complete sense when you share your perspective. So thank you.
One of the interesting things that a lot of people in our community saw after 9/11 was a need for many members of our community, that they felt a need to say, hey, I'm an American. So you saw a lot of people all of a sudden put American flags outside their house, almost to try and protect themselves from the violence they knew would be coming their way. So Sikh taxi drivers or cab drivers would put an American flag up immediately on their car because they knew that they were vulnerable to an attack at their work. And, in our group, we talked about the first murder after September 11th in a hate crime was a Sikh in Arizona who was shot and killed in the gas station he worked at. And so those are things that I think shaped over the last 20 years, a lot of the Sikh perspective of almost feeling like you have to prove that you belong here, that you almost have to prove that you are American enough. You have to prove that you are worthy of the respect that everyone in this country deserves. And so that really has shaped a lot of perspectives. And it's one of those things that I think the younger generation challenges. So like someone like me who was born in this country, I have a very different perspective than my parents who immigrated here, because I feel a sense of ownership here, because it's like, hey, I was born here. I've only ever lived in this country. And that's something that my parents and my grandparents didn't necessarily have the ability to say, or the language to say, because of their circumstances. And so that's where I was kind of getting with the question, is like, there's a lot that has shaped this idea of who the Sikh community is. And oftentimes it's directly related to the hate that the Sikh community has experienced, and need to then overcompensate by saying, hey, we're good people, we're this, we're that, and really trying to fit it into a gaze that people will say, all right, now I accept you because you did X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and it's kind of a balance too, because what I was thinking about, especially in relation to that second question of supporting the BLM movement, is part of that is just straight up part of the core values of the Sikh community. And so I think that that's an important piece too, is that sometimes people are doing this perhaps to protect themselves or put out the flag or whatever that may be. But at the same time, that fits kind of within the values that the Sikh community believes in and is trying to do. In the video, the one gentleman talked about, we don't believe in racism, or some, I'm paraphrasing here, but to me, that also speaks to, this is kind of who the Sikh community is. And so that's exciting and interesting to me.
I think
Any
that
other
something that's coming up with and something that Harmon just said, especially, and we talked a little bit earlier about this ideal of good immigrant and bad immigrant, which particularly as a Black woman, you know, and the legacy and history that Black folks have in America is not always something that the immigration part is not always something that we gravitate toward. However, there was a thought about, you know, the ownership that you start to feel as you are born on this land, as you, you know, build community and, you know, engage in the democratic process and, you know, fight wars in this country and things of that nature, and how the generations start to form their own beliefs and perspectives about who they are in this world. And how that can sometimes be counter to our ancestors and those that have come before us, because all of a sudden you become very much of who you are, you know, because you understand that that this hate and this violence that is coming towards you is not based on your good deeds. It's not based on your you know, assimilating more or you know, or making these adjustments. So it's like, okay, well, no, then I'm just going to be who I am because I feel like I am entitled to that. And I, as a Black woman, I'm seeing that in some of the younger generation, really, you know, myself included, as we, you know, go on being here in America, like, no, this is who we are. This is how we are showing up. And to somebody's point earlier, it's like, I'm not here to make you feel comfortable. I'm here to just be who I am authentically. And you need to start accepting that. So just kind of starting to make some of those connections, not just, you know, across culture and ethnicity and things of that nature. So.
Thank you, Bianca. Tracy, I see your hand up.
So the way that I understood this question, or my mindset when I was thinking of it, when it came to good or bad Sikhs, I believe that it brought awareness to the Sikh community because they were being judged as good or bad based on their aesthetic and how they looked. And so there was an attack on their community because they were generalized as Muslims, which is considered to be bad. So, and there was no separation between the two. So that's how I view that question when I was thinking of it.
Thank you, Tracy. Any final comments before we move forward?
Mark?
Yes, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I don't care.
One thing that
So I may misunderstand some things, but I think it's important for us as individuals to get out in the world and do things with other people rather than just our own group. For instance, whether it's work in a soup kitchen, to work for the Red Cross or so forth, go out and meet the people. I've fought on fire crews alongside of Native American ones, and I'm coming up with the wrong term. Help me. Latino crews, fire crews, and so forth. But when you work together with them, you get a better understanding. And so if all of us could do that, and 9/11 would be a perfect example to go and do that. It is eye-opening experience. And the right and the left in this country right now, we don't know the people of the other group and so forth. We don't mix with them. And if we did have some contact with them, maybe we understand each other better.
Thank you.
That makes sense to anybody, but that's me.
That
Makes
made
a lot of
sense.
sense. A lot of sense.
Yep, that's a similar conversation we had in our group, at least from my perspective. That's something I talked about. One thing I wanted to say is that it's sad that I feel that when we're little children, we're more open-minded. We don't mind playing with whoever is around us without looking or caring for who they are, what their names are, what color of their skin is, and we just happily go out there and play with everyone. And then we start this thing called education that I call actually a miseducation, because that's when we start learning about prejudice, about limitations, and so we go through this process of education, which is miseducation, and then as adults, we spend the rest of our lives trying to de-learn all of that stuff, and that's why we're here. So to me is really sad that we have to get there, or we have to go through that process of learning about all these divisions, all these different people, when they're not really all that different. We're all so similar in so many ways. And when we talk about immigrants being terrorists and being rapists and being, as a Mexican who grew up in Mexico and came as an undocumented child, I feel like that sometimes when people talk about these things, they're talking about me as well. So it's really unfortunate that so many people that make up this country now have come that way, including all of our political leaders right now, or most of them anyway, and yet it's incredible that we're still dealing with those kinds of things. So I appreciate this group so much for just allowing me that opportunity to learn and engage.
Thank you, Alfonso. Tamara, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, I'm cognizant of time at 7:30. I know Beth Clark wanted to say something. Beth, did you want to bring your voice into this space?
Well, I know that we're all taking off, but I don't even know if I can put it into words. Just this conversation has been so powerful, and I'm just thinking about this big picture, and then how Edward was talking about this big picture and humanity and being together and kind of swirling, and then we were talking about, like Bianca's talking about, bringing it to a classroom level. And sometimes thinking about in our small group, we were talking about kind of how the media has this influence. We are, and Alfonso, how you're saying, like, we are like unlearning to relearn, right? We have to get rid of all of that. There's so many pieces to all of this, and I think as I take away all of this and think on this for the next week, just thinking about the affirmation pieces that we have the ability to give others is so powerful. So, you know, as we watch that video of creating meals for Black Lives Matter, or like the Sikh community really having to put their own media out there so that we as a collective group can have a better understanding is important. But really thinking about just affirming every single student, that's what we can do, or affirming when we are on a team with others. And yeah, it's just this has just been super powerful. So I just wanted to leave with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you for that model. I think that's one of the things, we did a lot of head work and heart work, but that heart work is really holding up a mirror. And we've talked about it from different identities. And it's important to hold that mirror really close from my identity as a white woman who works in a state education agency. What feelings are coming up for me? What thoughts are coming up for me? What actions, what's bubbling up for me? So I keep that mirror really close. I think oftentimes we want to project out and talk about systems and this sort of thing, and there's a place for that. But right now, just holding that mirror really close to you and thinking about what's coming up for you as you're entering in this conversation through your identity. So just holding that right now and where you're at. And I want to share we've talked a little bit about action. This year, we want to talk about how can we put our freedom dreams, our freedom conversations that we're having, our liberating conversations, this liberating space, how are we moving towards action? So there are a couple things, and I'm going to share my screen here, and I'll send this out in a collective email to folks to think about. If you live in Wisconsin, well, I'm an English teacher, okay, folks? So you're going to have a little bit of reading here. You're going to have a little pre-reading, so I'll send that out. California's Punjabi Mexican American history. We do want to get feedback from you. So Mark, if you could drop in the exit slip, that would be helpful, the exit ticket, so we can get feedback about what worked for you tonight, how we can do a better job as facilitators. But also, this is an important week in the Sikh community, in our larger community, right? This is our shared history. This is our shared healing, our shared interdependence. If you live anywhere in Wisconsin or near this area, the Sikh community is putting on a series of events to lean into that healing piece, to lean into learning. And so we'll drop this in the email as well, but you can see that they have events coming up on Thursday. Friday is the anniversary of the mass shooting at the Sikh temple. And so there's a vigil that will be held there. Saturday is a complete day of learning with different workshops. All of this is free of charge. There's only one, I think, that you need to register for, but you can go on here and take a look at it. And there's an event on Sunday as well. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you. We'll put that out there. So exit ticket, if you can complete that, we'll send out the reading for next week. And think about where you're at, how you're showing up in your own identity, and what's this action, what's stirring within you. And perhaps if it's accessible to you, if you're in the Oak Creek area, please take advantage of just continuing our deep in learning. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Harmon. Harmon, anything, final words from you before we call it a night?
Sorry. Yeah, thank you for sharing this space with me. And next week, I think we're going to touch on more of the Sikh immigration story to America and the connection points there as well. But I'm looking forward to it. I really appreciate you all.
All right. So if nothing else, we want to thank you all for being in community, for leaning in, and we look forward to being in community with you again next week. So good night, everyone.